So thank you again for chatting with us. We would love to learn, how was your experience as past president of SENTAC, Ellen, and then Sheila, then we'll talk about you because you are like basically SENTAC in a nutshell. So
Sort of. How much do you know about the establishment, or how much has been recorded or spoken about the development of pediatric ENT and SENTAC and ASPO and that type of thing?
I would say that even if there is something recorded about this, I would love to hear it from your perspective. And I think everybody would love to hear it from your perspective too. So go for it.
So I was very fortunate to be in a unique position at a unique time. I had done my training in Groote Hospital in South Africa in the 1968 to 70. And during that time, then the Africans would be using cow dung for lots of things. So they used cow dung to put on their houses, and they used cow dung dried for fuel. They also used cow dung as a sterilization after birth for the baby's umbilicus. And the kids developed tetanus neonatorum. And the only way to treat the tetanus neonatorum, or the way we started to treat it, was we did a tracheotomy on these neonates, and they were then ventilated for 10 to 14 days with total body paralysis until the effect of the botulism wore off, of the tetanus. And we were very successful. We were able to cut the mortality rate from about 90% down to 10 to 15%. In 1972, Sheila and I realized that we would like to leave South Africa and move to America. And so we moved to Cincinnati at Children's Hospital at the University of Cincinnati. At about the same time, in fact, exactly the same day, Robin Cotton started at Children's Hospital at the University of Cincinnati, and he and I worked together. Robin had worked with Blair Ferrin to show that could you incise a pediatric rabbit cricoid, did the cricoid heal, did it grow, etc. And then one day, Robin and I were asked to go to the NICU to consult on a kid who'd been intubated for a prolonged period of time. And that was at the time of the expansion of neonatology. So neonatology really led the way for pediatric otolaryngology. I'll explain that. What had happened was that lots of the kids were intubated for prolonged periods of time, started to get subglottic stenosis, and Robin and I went ahead with the consultation and the first kid who had the cricoid split at Children's Hospital. So there were people involved in otolaryngology at the children's hospitals. And the children's hospitals were well established. There was Boston Children's, Cincinnati Children's, CHOP, Toronto Children's. And in these hospitals, the ENT had been done by adult otolaryngologists. There were no such thing as peds ENT. And they were doing a pretty good job. They could do T's and A's and PE tubes and all that kind of stuff. What then happened was, with the expansion of neonatology and the increasing incidence of specialty treatment needed for kids with prolonged intubation, people started to gravitate towards the children's hospitals and limit their treatment to kids. And in the beginning, the adult otolaryngologists really didn't like us at all. They didn't want us coming into the children's hospital. But when they began to see that the services needed were for kids with very traumatized and delicate airways, they began to realize that this wasn't the field that they wanted to do. And so it kind of led to an opening for pediatric ENT to start. Then in about 1971, Bob Rubin has loved beautifully documented this. Silvenstuhl and Culbertson at the AAO gathered a bunch of people who were interested in pediatric otolaryngology. There was no formal society or anything like that. In 1972, in Dallas, they started to consider putting together the bylaws. And the story is told that I'm positive it's true that Bob Rubin wrote down the bylaws on the back of a napkin. If we could find that napkin, that would be outstanding. So in 1973, SENTAC was established. And SENTAC was one of the first, and I think one of the rare multidisciplinary organizations, not just with pediatric otolaryngologists, but with anybody who had an interest in providing care for kids with ear, nose, and throat, hearing, and speech problems. And then at about the same time, there were these pediatric otolaryngology study groups. There were, I think, maybe 10 or 20 of us from the various children's hospitals, and we would go to each other's hospital maybe once a year in these study groups. And it was, that preceded endoscopy days, but it was just a study group that was established. And in 1979, they just started to discuss putting together a, quote, senior society for pediatric otolaryngology. Mark Richardson, later Mark Richardson, was asked to develop the bylaws. And in Houston, 1984, ASPO was established.
SENTAC.
No, ASPO.
Okay.
So I was president of SENTAC in 1984. Sheila tells the story that I had the cleanest desk in the hospital because everything that was on my desk, I put on Sheila's desk. So she took over all the responsibilities. And as far as we can remember, that's when Sheila became so involved with SENTAC. SENTAC preceded ASPO, and so she was already Mama SENTAC when that was going. And so when ASPO came to be, she took over ASPO.
Okay. So you were president in 1984, you said?
1984.
Okay. Do you remember back then, what were your goals for SENTAC at that time? Do you remember?
What we had tried to do was to expand it into a multidisciplinary field. We didn't simply want to be pediatric otolaryngologists. We had all kind of participated in the study groups, so we knew each other collegially as pediatric ENT. And we worked closely with audiology, with speech pathology, but on a professional, not an intellectually exchanging idea basis. So our thought was to try and really encourage the specialties that worked with us to become more articulate in the society, to become not just visitors, but as actually part of the society. And so that was our real main thrust was, yes, we had pediatric ENT, and yeah, we wanted to talk about the surgical cases, etc. But we made a very specific effort to try and include and expand, if you will, the repertoire of what the meeting was to encourage these other people to attend. And I think we were successful. Obviously, it has continued.
Yes, no, absolutely. I think, you know, we still benefit from everything that you guys have done. So this is terrific. We've increased the numbers of speech pathologists and audiologists. We now have pediatricians, other pediatric subspecialties, so GI, pulmonology. So yeah, it's great. Would you say, so back then, the main emphasis was then airway, and then it switched to everything, you know, including like the multidisciplinary teams for otology, for example, but what do you think?
So initially it was definitely airway.
Mm-hmm.
That was kind of the reason for your being. That's why you were a pediatric ENT. When you got called into the hospital,
Mm-hmm.
you got called to the NICU and you saw the kids there. I think once people began to accept that pediatric otolaryngology was its own individual specialty, then we could start to expand out into the airway, into audiology, into cochlear implantation, all of the related fields. And with those expansions came the people participating in those subgroups. So audiology, speech pathology for cochlear implants, airway, GI guys, dysmorphology for upper airway problems,
Right.
swallowing problems.
Right. No, absolutely. That's wonderful. So let me ask Sheila then some questions, and then I have another question for you, Ellen. So you're not off the hook yet. So Sheila, you started helping with Centec in 1984 then, when
I
he
think
became the
so.
president. Okay,
Yes.
to keep his desk clean, I guess, right?
Well, no, my desk was dirty. His desk was dirty.
Exactly. So, and how long were you helping Centec?
2013 was my last meeting.
13. So 29 years, correct? Is that my math is correct?
Yep.
Okay. Oh my goodness. That's
I
more
know.
than I wasn't even born, you know.
Well, neither was I.
So what, I mean, I know it was a lot of work because it started, I'm sure when it started, it was a much smaller group and it became quite a larger effort at the end, right? Can you tell us a little bit of that story, how it went, you know, the growth?
You know, I really don't really know, Daniela. It just every year we would send out all the to the different hospitals and different areas, and more people would register. And it really got to the point where there was like, what, 200 people, 150 to 200 people.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah. So that it really did grow and thrive, so to speak.
And that's when you needed help. That's when Cindy helped you.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Then, you know, so you were 29 years and then we had Cindy. So yes. So the Seid legacy continued. Do you remember how many people were in the first meetings you organized?
No.
Any idea?
Haven't
20, 30?
Maybe.
Maybe.
Okay,
I would
so
say 30, 40, 30 to
Wow.
50.
So it increased like almost tenfold, eightfold.
Mhm,
That's a lot.
mhm.
Okay. That's amazing. And so one thing that I do remember, I mean, I started in Centec, my gosh, when I was a fellow. So that was 1999. So, and the meetings were truly much smaller. Was that, you guys believe, I mean, is that one of the strengths of Centec, as being, you know, a smaller community? What do you think in that regard? You know, what do you think about growing Centec, for example? How's that with the past?
I think that initially the strength was that it was a small group, a small, very committed group. But as we expanded and attracted more people, I think that gave it a momentum all of its own. I don't see Centec as being a unique, small, driven group by a small, internally motivated group of people. I see it as really an expansion of knowledge and fields of interest with people in those peripheral, if you will, peripheral areas, giving more intake, more input into the organization. So I only see it as a growing institution. I don't see this as a small group, no.
No, absolutely. And I'll tell you, it's definitely not small anymore. We've had almost 500 people attending the last Centec.
What?
And it
Oh,
was,
my goodness.
yes, and it was live. So, you know, online,
Oh, okay.
thanks to COVID.
Uh-huh.
So, yeah, so if I, and I think you talked a little bit about this, but if I had to ask you, what would you like to see SENTAC become or turn into in the future? What would make you happy?
I would not like it to change. I would like it to remain the same as it is. It's not a senior society in that you have to submit papers and theses to be admitted to. It's a group of people who want to be there because they want to associate with people delivering care to the same kind of children that they could take care of. And not being limited by, well, you don't have a higher degree, or you didn't write your thesis, or you didn't do this, or you didn't. It's simply people who want to participate, who want to share their information and remain collegially, friendly collegially.
I cannot agree more. I think that's one of the beauties of SENTAC is the fact that we have all these bright minds, but we're very collegial. I mean, nobody's afraid to go and speak. I mean, we have a lot of young, medical students. My daughter who's in high school presented. And yeah, so I mean, you feel empowered enough to actually share your ideas and learn, which is fantastic.
One of the things that sticks with me even today was the feeling that for the fellows, you shouldn't present your first paper presentation at ASPO. ASPO will tear you apart. The senior guys will tear you apart. If you really want to present your paper, get good feedback, but do it in a collegial, friendly environment, your first paper should be a SENTAC paper.
Maybe that should be the name for SENTAC, right? The Collegial Friendly Society.
Right.
Yeah, I like that. No, it is true. You're absolutely right. Well, I cannot thank you both enough, not just for your time for the interview, but also Ellen for steering us in the right way, and Sheila for really carrying us all the way for so many years. I mean, you guys are amazing, and we owe so much to both of you. Thank you.
Thanks,
To the
Lynn.
Saids in general, we're including Cindy here too. Okay.
Thanks, Danielle.